Good afternoon, welcome to Sports Federation TV. My name is Alton Davids, I'll be your host. Today we've got an exciting lineup for you. We're chatting squash, we're chatting fishing on a jet ski, we're chatting a bit of local football, and we're chatting rollerball and rollerblading. Let's start with some squash. Natalie, ex-world #1, welcome to our humble studio.
Thanks, Alton. It's good to be here.
Thanks for coming. Ex-world #1 in squash, I mean, that must have been huge. Tell us a bit about the background to that.
Well, I really wasn't given much choice. When I was about 2.5 years old, my parents stuck a racket in my hand, and they'd built a squash club up in Johannesburg in Parkview, and it became like a second home for me. So I guess playing all those junior tournaments, coming through it, there was sort of a natural move for me to move into the sport professionally. My parents took me across overseas when I was about 15 years old to sort of see really whether or not I had it, or whether I was a big fish in a small pond, so to speak. And I won the British Junior Open at that age, and they thought, okay, well, she has something, so let's maybe pursue this. And when I finished school, I joined the tour, and I went across and based myself in England, and that was my start before I moved across the United States, and I've been there ever since. So yeah, getting to #1 was pretty cool.
Tell us a bit about this tour that you just mentioned, because obviously you travel the world circuit. What was that like?
Yeah, it's the World Women's Squash Association, and it's basically take you all over the world. There's tournaments in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, a lot in the States, Europe, Middle East is actually pretty big as well. So it's the same thing as the ATP or the WTA, LPGA tours. You know, similar things. There's ranking points available for different levels of prize money brackets. And you know, if you do well and you win enough, you get to the top.
And you claim all these big prestigious titles.
I have a few prestigious titles.
Don't be modest. Roll a few of them off your tongue.
Well, I'm a 3-time US Open champion. That's probably one of the biggest titles. I won the Qatar Classic as well. I won Monte Carlo. I've won the Tournament of Champions, which is in Grand Central Station in New York. So those are a few of the cool ones, and I've won 6 U.S. national titles as well, and I won 1 South African national title. So that one I hold dear to my heart.
That's where you come from.
Exactly. So yeah, it's been really cool. I mean, what a great way to see the world. It's not all roses, because obviously it's hard. It's your job. You're in sometimes some tough situations, and you're maybe not in perfect physical health or shape, but you still have to get your job done. But I've met so many incredible people. I've got to play sport in front of huge crowds, incredible iconic places, pyramids at Giza. I mean, wow. 3,000 people packed in there, and the front wall is open, and you look through the front wall, and there are the pyramids. I mean, it's just incredible. Outdoor court, And Hong Kong, I played on the court there. They stick that up on the Hong Kong waterfront, again, outdoors. Nice. It's just amazing. So, to be able to experience something like that, that's sort of very special.
I'm green with envy.
You should be.
Natalie's been around the world. Let's see what squash is all about. She's put together a little clip just to show you what squash is really made of. Let's check this out.
First one we're going to do is the backhand, and then I'll show you how to hit the forehand. So the backhand, we're going to take the racket back and swing through. A little bit different from tennis. In tennis, you drop the racket to get the ball to brush the ball, so it like spins and drop over the net. In squash, we have like a really big front wall to hit onto, so you want to unmove the ball. Almost like creating back swing. The big thing with squash as well is that we use our legs. So this is where all the power base is. So when we're bending our knees, you see how the transition will also help in both rhythm and also power. Through and under the ball. Again, transferring my weight forwards. I'll take you through other series of shots, a fun shot. The first one is a post. So we get to use the side wall to the front wall. So if you're playing, you can hit forward end post that goes around the ankle. And sit down in that, it doesn't really bounce, so it's a great way to try and win the point. To start playing squash, all you need to know is that the lines in the court, the top red line that goes all the way around is out. So if you hit that or above it, it's out. The bottom red line is known as the 10. If you hit that or below it, that's out as well. The middle red line is only for the service. You just have to serve above that cut line in order to get the ball in play. The red lines you see on the floor, 2 boxes, are also only for the service. And when we start, you'd have to have 1 foot in the box, and then you can serve above the cut line and get that going.
So as you can see, squash is a very interesting game. We'll show you a few more clips as the evening progresses. We'll show you the clips of actual matches. What Natalie just demonstrated is the basic techniques of how to play a forearm, backhand, and a burst. Those are the basic shots, eh?
Yeah, pretty basic. I understand, Elton, that you play a little squash, so I'm looking forward to getting you on the court at some point.
Oh, I don't know if I'll be...
I want to see how good your forehand and backhand is, you know?
I can eat the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, the game of squash is a lot like chess, and it's, you know, fast moving, fast paced, but you have to be able to make decisions, play the ball into the space. You know, it doesn't bounce out of the corners so easily, so, you know, it's a highly skilled game as well. So I think there's always another level to reach, right? So whether you're fast and you can get to every ball, but your technique isn't quite that great, you can have a great game with someone who isn't as fast but is much more skilled and maybe you know, likes to move the ball around. So it's a super fun sport for everybody to play.
Absolutely,
you know?
and like you say, it's a mental game as much as a physical game.
Yeah.
Because if you're not on that tee, you're not controlling that game, and your opponent then has the better
Yeah, you don't want to you're only going round. You want to stay in the middle as much as you can, right?
Exactly.
I
You
think
control the...
Yeah, I think one of the funnest things to see is whenever my mother comes over to visit and things, she's now 72 years old, but she's the current world over 70 champion,
Wow.
which is very cool. So she won that in Hong Kong this last summer. And she comes across, and I always put my best under 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds on against her, and what a match that is.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah, it's great.
Let's take a short ad break. We'll be right back after the break. See you now. Welcome back to Sports Federation TV. We're chatting an interesting game called squash, and I'm joined by the former world #1 ladies champ. Do people often refer to you as that, Natalie, or is that not really?
No, you know, I think it's, you know, whenever I'm doing events or, you know, I'm still out playing a little bit and competing, you know, that comes up, which is kind of cool. It's nice. But, you know, in general, I think, you know, at some point, you've got to move on with your identity as well, right? Can't be completely and solely attached to that, otherwise you're constantly living in the past.
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that I'm involved in within the sport, which is, you know, transitioning from being a pro player where I was limited in my time with what I could get involved in. I did run the Women's Squash Association. I was president of that for 8 years. So, you know, it was nice to give back to the sport in that regard. But now I sit on the board of Squash Haven, which is an inner city youth program based at Yale University in New Haven. So we help 100 kids there that, you know, really they get academic tutoring as well as squash enrichment, and it's a wonderful program. I'm director of squash at Chelsea Piers now as well, and then I get involved in things like this big tournament down here, the Keith Granger Memorial Tournament. So, you know, since I've stepped back from the Pro Tour, I've been able to sort of leverage what I did in the game and my connections and my contacts, and sort of try and, you know, sort of dig deeper and really try and give back to the sport, and also, you know, enjoy it in different ways.
Yep. So tell us a bit about this Keith Granger competition that's happening this week.
Yeah, so the Keith Granger, it's actually the UCT Keith Granger Memorial Tournament. And my brother Keith played squash, and he was at UCT. And he suffered from bone cancer, and he died after 4 years of fighting the disease back in 2001. And UCT decided to name their Open Championship after him, which was incredible and a huge honor for him. You know, he got involved, he had his leg amputated, and amongst other things that he had to have operations for to continuously trying to remove the cancer from his body. But he didn't stop him from playing. He would get on the court, he would coach people with a prosthetic leg. He organized a trip across to America with his friend Donovan Hart, and they came across with 2 teams, boys and girls, and they hired 2 Winnebagos, and they traveled around America playing all these different universities. So, you know, I think he was passionate about the sport, he was passionate about UCT, and by developing this tournament, I felt, one, I wanted to try and help give back to South African squash, and by helping the pros not have to leave the country to go and compete all the time. So we started smaller, and we've built this tournament up so that now it's actually an international event. There's a men's draw and a women's draw. So we've got players that are coming from Egypt and Pakistan and the UK. And then it gives our local players an opportunity to actually play for those points, get some prize money and a sort of a starting point. And it seems to be pretty successful now. So it's a wonderful way for us as a family. My parents are down here as well, for us to remember my brother and celebrate his life, and also sort of give back to the sport and try and see if we can actually have some more South African champions coming out.
And that's a great legacy from a sporting and a squash family, but also for someone who was passionate about squash.
Absolutely. So, you know, I think it's really important. You know, I had to leave the country to really pursue what my passion and my goal to be the best in my sport. And, you know, it's expensive, and it's also takes you out of your support group, takes away from your family. And actually what it did do with me is I've actually now compete for the United States rather than South Africa. Although my heart is still here. So I think, you know, by staying involved and trying to encourage more things to happen in the sport back here in South Africa, I feel like I can still give back a lot, and hopefully see, you know, South African squash rise. So it's great all around.
Absolutely. Let's, I promised you some footage of what a real squash match is all about. Let's check this out.
Straight to Grinham, 8-3, game ball.
So as you can see, squash is quite a vigorous and strenuous game, to say the least. Natalie, where was that played?
That match is at Vassar College in the United States, and my opponent there is a girl called Rachel Grinham from Australia. And Rachel is also a former world #1, world champion, awesome player, and my nemesis. How'd you find that clip?
Yeah.
I'm sure I try to bury most of those clips with Rachel. But yeah, it was a bruiser of a match, that incredible hard match. I actually think I've lost that game. So
Oops, maybe it's the wrong clip.
oops,
Then.
yeah, what are you guys doing? But you know, fun, hard match, and an awesome opponent.
Yeah. coming back to the Open that's happening at UCT, tell us a bit about the matches, where, when, and how.
Sure. So we're actually at the semi-final stage today, and the matches will be going on actually in about an hour. Actually, so we've got some great players actually from South Africa competing. Sioli Waters is the #1 seed, and she's got through. So I'm quite excited to actually watch her play as well. And I believe Angus is from England, who's the #1 seed, but he had a incredibly tough route to get through. Last night he had to beat Rodney Durbach, who's a Cape Townian.
Yep.
And an old friend of mine, and he is now 42 years old.
And still plays a mean game though,
Mean game of squash, and he took this kid to within an inch of his life, and he lost in 5 games. I don't think, this guy is ranked like 118 in the world, and Rodney gave him everything that he could cope with. So good on Rod, and so I'm kind of interested to see how he fronts up today, and whether that match last night took anything out of him, or whether he is young and fresh and fit, and you know, he uses the match as a good way to actually get going, get his juices flowing. So.
Sioli's been on the show, just so by the way.
Oh, she's great.
She's now you've touched on an interesting point. How did you manage the recovery process? Because you just mentioned Rod having to play a hard match last night and now having to come back and play again today. I mean, on a pro tour, the same thing happens. How do you manage that kind of scenario?
So training, it's all in the preparation, right? You learn to recover through hard training, getting up on a daily basis, and you know, going to work basically. You know, there's other ways. Nutrition plays a big part of that. Good hydration plays a big part. Sleep plays a big part. Stress levels as well. I think a lot of people worry, and you know, being able to manage and you know, cope with stress and coping 101, right? But really it's your fitness levels. So you know, playing squash, it's one of the toughest and hardest sports there is to play out there. You use both your systems. So making sure that you're well hydrated, you get on a good sleeping pattern, you eat well, and that you're fit, and you know, you've got to minimize injuries and minimize things that might go wrong because of the little things that you're not seeing too.
And that's the key, is managing your person more than anything else
Absolutely.
to succeed.
Yeah.
Let's take another clip and let's see how much fun squash can really be. Check this out.
Turn 2. Down. Turn 2. Hello. 2, 3. Hello. 5, 3. Seven, third. Left foot. Left side. Start. Center 3.
This is Sports Federation TV. We're chatting squash. We're joined by a young lady called Natalie. So, Natalie, now that you've been to this prestigious tournament and open of your brother in honor and memory of him, where to for you?
So I head back up to Joburg on Saturday, and after that I head back to the States where I live, and I live just outside New York City. I'm trying to get ready for the Pan American Games, which is in July, mid-July, and it's the huge games, and it's in Toronto. And that's where all the big sports from, you know, all the Pan American, so USA, Canada, and the South American countries. So that'll be great. But you know, we've got this clinic that we're doing up at UCT as well, and so I'm going to be, you know, working with hopefully some youngsters coming in, and maybe some of the pros as well would stop down, doing a bit of Q&A and work like that. So you know, some good stuff, some good squash stuff, and I'm also working on my golf game. You know, it's the summer in America is coming around now, so you know, my other passion now, I can sneak some golf games in.
Well, you got the hand-eye coordination for it, so you should be good.
I mean, do you play that as well, Elton?
My handicap is golf.
We're going to have to find a sport that we can play.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So, how do people follow you? Are you on Twitter, Facebook, all of those kinds of social media sites?
You know what? I'm not a Twitter girl. Facebook, you can kind of find me on that, but I'm unfortunately a bit sort of on the social media front. I keep a low profile.
Okay.
But you can find me at Chelsea Piers, which is where I work, and that's an unbelievable 10 acres under roof sports facility. They've got like Olympic-sized swimming pool, 2 ice rinks, 11 squash courts and a hardball doubles court, 7 indoor tennis courts, soccer fields, like gymnastics. It's just an incredible building. So I've been really lucky to be involved in that, and you know, I have to make sure that I get back there from time to time. I can't be traveling around the world so much anymore.
That is so unfair. One day when I'm big, I want to have work in an environment like that, because that's what we're lacking in South Africa.
Oh, it's incredible. Literally, every time I walk into the building, I think, why am I not 5 years old right now?
Yeah.
Because it's just, I mean, everything is right under one roof. I mean, for parents and family, you know, they come in, they've got one kid that does lacrosse, one that plays squash, one that goes to swim. I mean, it's just a one-stop shop, and very cool place.
Natalie, thank you for your time. It's
Thanks,
been inspiring.
Elton. Thanks so much for having me on.
You're welcome. We'll see you on Facebook, because that's
There
where
you
we'll
go.
catch you. Let's take a short ad break, and when we come back, we'll move from land to sea. See you now.